Hello everyone, it's me Josephine Sneha here. Hope you're all doing well. In this video, we are going to be discussing about world wars and its social security. So this is one of the important topic and almost the conclusory part in social history of England, which is why it's really important, and of course it's good to know about the World War I and II as well. So let's begin, shall we? To begin with an introductory note, in the first half of the 20th century, we see there was a drastic development in science and technology. Of course, science and technology was introduced so as to make the human life very comfortable. So there was like a lot of progress in that. There were many patrons, everyone were encouraging it. But what people did not foresee, or what they did not predict, was that the disaster it could bring, the magnitude of those disasters and the aftermath. Nobody predicted it, but that's what happened. So that is when the First World War happened. The entire thing was changed. Nobody understood that nobody were capable of comprehending that science technology were able to bring so many disasters. It happened for many years, right? And after the First World War, so there was a League of Nations which was established, and everyone thought okay, fine, so this was established, so there will not be any more wars. But it was not true. After other few years, the Second World War happened, and once again there was entire change everywhere. People suffered the most. There were loss of human lives. Even people who were alive, they wished that they were dead. So many lives were paralyzed, etc. And that's when UNO came into existence. Of course, UNO did a good job because they acted as a mediator between different countries in order to prevent a large scale war. Of course, even though UNO does not have the complete power to punish or change the ideas or anything, they do not have absolute power, the dominant power of dominance, etc. But then they act as a mediator. They'll try the way to smoothen everything and make sure that no other wars happen in such way the First and the Second War happened. So that's all with the introductory note. And also to add few more points, we can say that the Second World War was considered to be a war of liberation, because after First World War, there were still things happening discrimination, slavery, and even other things as far as classes in the society considered. But after this, it was entirely liberated. Slavery, dominance, everything was stopped, and people were considered to be free. Even many countries were given democracy. So we can call the Second World War as something to be a war of liberation. People started fighting for their own independence and everything. So after that, everything automatically started changing as a result of this. Now let's talk about the effects of First World War. Well, the First World War actually ended in 1918, and it was completely due to the efforts of the president at that time in USA, Woodrow Wilson. So there were loss of lives and many things. But the things that happened at that time was, the first thing you should remember is social leveling. So as it was the war time, we could see that the soldiers of different classes were mingling at the same place. So they have to stay in the same place, they have to fight for the same team, and then they have to stay in the same tents, etc. So social leveling was happening at the time. People did not even have the time to think about which class they belong. Whether they belong to the upper class, lower class, nobody knew. So this was happening in the war scenario. At the same time, in the society also, many people started mingling together. If you actually remember, in the early days, people were divided as upper class, lower class, etc. And there was a constant clash between them. In the society, we see that the upper class could not enjoy all the luxuries like they used to do in the past. Because of the war situation, the government started imposing lots of taxes on them. So they were really scared to tell that they belong to the upper class, because if they do so, or if they show themselves to be upper class, they have to pay more taxes, of course. So this is one reason. And the second one is mass production of clothes. Yes, at the time fashion was entirely different. So people of the upper class, they used to buy luxurious items, whereas the lower class, they differ. But due to the mass production of clothes and everything, many were able to purchase. And since men and women, they were working in industries and everything, so they were able to purchase all the fashionable items which were available for the upper class as well. So now we could not differentiate people based on their clothes, because even people from the lower or the middle class society, they were also able to wear the same fashionable clothes like the upper class people. So this was also one thing, and the purchasing power also increased at the time. We can see that the working man's wife was able to afford the fashionable clothes as that of the women in the higher class society. And the education institutions at that time played a major role in promoting a classless society, of course. Like for example, Cambridge, like the men from the upper class society, they started like holding seats for their son or for their family, of course. Like if someone is from the same college, like they start like holding the seats for their future generation. Now no longer it was available, so any person, if they have the particular skills, knowledge and everything, they can actually enter with writing appropriate tests and everything, so they can also enter and study. So now admissions were not based on the class they belong to, so any person can enter, and we can see that this as a very huge step taken by the educational institutions at that time, of course. And also in the post-war scenario, we see a lot of revolutions happening in terms of fashion. So the dressing sense, of course, obviously changed. So women were not covered entirely till their knee. Instead, they started wearing like skirts, etc. And men started dressing very smartly, of course. And this comes because of the students from Oxford and Cambridge. So they started wearing trousers, of course, like which looked like a balloon stuff. So they started like changing their outfits, like somewhat like similar to what we are wearing in the modern times. Of another striking change is that the lack of domestic workers at home. So at that time, like if we see that the upper class people, like they'll have domestic servants at their home, but now like people were not ready to do that. Everything was changing, right? The social everything was changing. So what happens is that like when their husband or when their partner is working in the industries or factories, their wife, their children, they started to moving on to the same place. Instead of working as a domestic servant in a particular household, they started working in the industry so that they could be with their husband or with their family as well. And not only that, compared to what they were paid at the working in the house or anything, they were paid much better in the factories and industries. So people were no longer available. They considered to be a bit low. So they started moving there. So it was like really difficult at that time to find the domestic labors. So we see that even the women from the upper class, everything, they started doing their own. Moving on to the effects of Second World War. Of course, like after the First World War, we see that within the gap of 20 years, another war which was very fierce, it broke out. It is the Second World War, and it almost happened for 6 years. So it ended around 1945. The results were completely like magnificent compared to the First World War. But the effects, as we see, is that now of course there was like constant change. As told earlier, it is a war of liberation, of course. So now not only the people or the education institution wants to have a classless society, now even the government wants to do so. So the government started taking certain steps and methods so as to bring a balanced thing between the upper and the lower class people, of course. So a lot of governors were appointed. So instead of the government itself taking care of everything, which was impossible to do, so governors were appointed. A lot of boards were created for electricity, transport, etc. were created. So this made them ensure that they could track everything, and also they can like give employment to many people and not only that, they tried their best to fill the gap so as to make the life of the poor people uplift. But then like we see that they were not entirely successful, of course, because like not everything we start in the beginning will yield fruitful results, right? So it takes consistency. So similarly, government did their best, but they were not able to completely eradicate everything and give a classless society, of course. Of course, there was still like lot of discrimination, everything taking place, but they tried their best to bridge the gap. Next thing is elections. So as soon as the Second World War ended in 1945, elections were conducted, and the member called Clement Attlee from Labour Party, he came into the power. So he was like ruling. So we could see that he made constant efforts to show that the working class people are really important in the society. So he brought a lot of good changes. He made sure that they receive Pension Act, Family Allowance Act, National Insurance Policy. So a lot of things were like introduced so that it would benefit these people in the longer run. Next one is healthcare. So if we see that in those days only the privileges were able to access proper healthcare, but now we see that a lot of changes were introduced, so even anybody should be able to access it. So healthcare policy was introduced so that any people could afford proper healthcare, so they can take care of themselves, their family, and even optical and dental treatment was available for the poor and the lower class. So this is really an important move because this improved the public's healthcare, of course. And we see that at that time, like many people were in need of healthcare system. After the World War, we see the effects and the aftermath, etc. So poor people were not able to afford it. So these act made sure that their lives are important, and government was like making a lot of constant effort and care for them to live a normal life just like everybody. And even National Assistance Act was introduced. So this was done so that like people who were unable to get any labor or anything, they have no means to earn money, so they were also like given certain fund or kind of like amount was given so that they can take care of their basic need, food, clothing and shelter. So government made sure that the income was given even to the needy families, because they might not have proper education, they would not know any skills or to take care of themselves or anything. So even government wanted to prevent them. So to conclude with, in 1950s, the Labour Party was pushed aside and then came Conservative Party. So this Conservative Party also came forward and put forth new welfare schemes. For example, they got slum clearance scheme, housing welfare scheme. So with these lot of schemes emerging, we can see that England was probably on the charts in order to show themselves as they were working for the welfare of their society, welfare of their community, welfare of their people, etc. So taking these as a hints, even other nations, they started working for the welfare of the community and welfare of their society. So that is how, like, after the world wars and everything, so people slowly started building themselves. So this is what happened after the world wars, of course. So that's all in this video. So we'll meet in some other thing. Until that, stay safe and make healthy choices. Bye.